Meanwhile, Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov and the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio are in the Saudi capital for high-level talks aimed at negotiating an end to Russia's war in Ukraine. Lavrov arrived in Riyadh with Russia's Foreign Affairs Advisor Yuri Ushakov, and he is due to hold talks with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who's already in Saudi Arabia, and he's establishing the framework for a meeting between U.S. President Donald Trump and Russia's Vladimir Putin. The top diplomats will also discuss restoring ties between Washington and Moscow.
Mr. Secretary, what do you intend?
Let's get the view from Washington with DW correspondent Janelle Dumalaon. Janelle, what more do we know about the meeting's agenda and its participants?
Well, Tommy, as you said there, the Secretary of State is expected to meet his Russian counterpart, Sergey Lavrov. He's expected to be accompanied by presidential aide Yuri Ushakov. As for the U.S. delegation, Rubio is expected to be accompanied by U.S. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, as well as U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. Now, as for the agenda, Rubio is framing this as a follow-up to the phone call that Trump and Putin had last week. In essence, they are saying that this is a meeting to pave the way for a potential summit between Trump and Putin themselves. Now, it's interesting to note that the State Department has been downplaying any notion that these meetings are meant to be a negotiation on the future of Ukraine and the war there. They want this meeting to be viewed as initial steps that the U.S. team is taking in order to assess the viability of negotiations, to see how serious the Russians are about peace, and to see where the interests lay. But as you already mentioned, it's also interesting to note that noticeably absent from this agenda and from the roster of participants are Ukrainian interests and Ukraine itself. As such, that must tell us a little bit about whose input Trump thinks is important in terms of resolving this war.
So the Americans want to hear what the Russians have to say. The Russian foreign minister has also said he wants to listen to the ideas that the U.S. has on ending the war in Ukraine. So do we have an idea? Do we know what these ideas are that Marco Rubio will bring to the table?
Well, Tommy, it's worth noting here that Rubio has been very cautious thus far, saying these are early steps, that nothing has been finalized. So really what he seems to be trying to do there is sort of manage expectations. He wants to telegraph that no big outcome should be expected from this meeting. However, whatever he does have to say should be sort of considered in the larger context of what else has been coming out of the U.S. administration on this front in the past days. You had, for example, last week, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth appearing to demand concessions from Ukraine without negotiations even having started. He had to walk those back. You had U.S. Special Envoy to Ukraine, Keith Kellogg, saying that while Kyiv would be included in the peace negotiations, European allies would not, and that's something that Secretary Rubio then had to walk back. When Trump himself was asked whether Ukraine would be a full member of these peace negotiations, he would simply say, that's an interesting question. So we don't know exactly what Rubio is going to say in those meetings tomorrow, but whatever he does have to say is unfolding in this larger context of confusing diplomatic signals coming out of the U.S., and that is definitely something that should be a cause for concern for Ukraine and its European allies, and we can already see, of course, that it is.
Okay, DW correspondent Janelle Dumalaon reporting from Washington. Thank you.